You know what's wild? Sometimes the biggest earthquakes start with the smallest tremors. And that's exactly what happened when a single piece of paper landed on someone's desk one ordinary morning. Nobody saw it coming. Nobody expected what would unfold next. But here we are, talking about one of the most dramatic custody situations the royal family has faced in generations. Let me paint you a picture. Imagine waking up, grabbing your coffee, and suddenly discovering that two kids who were supposed to be safely enrolled in school, had basically vanished from official records. Not literally vanished, mind you, but gone in a way that made people who deal with these things professionally start asking some very uncomfortable questions. Because when you're talking about children with royal connections, they don't just disappear from paperwork by accident. Everything about their lives is documented, tracked, monitored. So when those traces suddenly go cold, that's when alarm bells start ringing. Now, I want you to think about this for a second. Picture yourself as a school administrator, just doing your daily routine, checking enrollment lists, making sure everything's in order. You notice two names that have always been there, names you recognize, names that matter, and suddenly they're just gone. No explanation, no warning, no heads up. Your first thought might be, okay, maybe the family moved. Maybe they transferred schools. Happens all the time, right? But then you start digging a little deeper, and that's when things get weird. No withdrawal notice, no request for transcripts, no communication with any of the official channels that are supposed to be kept in the loop for children with this level of protection and oversight. This wasn't some clerical error. This was deliberate. And when that report started making its way up through the proper channels, crossing desks, and eventually landing in front of palace officials, people started connecting dots that painted a pretty disturbing picture. Medical appointments that had been scheduled, canceled, and not just postponed, canceled with no plans to reschedule. Welfare contacts trying to do their routine check-ins, radio silence. Educational trusts that had been set up to ensure these children's futures, dissolved. Just like that. Gone. Here's where it gets really interesting. You'd think that when families are working through sensitive custody situations, especially ones involving children with international ties and legal complexities, they'd increase communication, right? Keep everyone informed, maintain transparency, make sure all the safeguards are in place. But that's not what was happening here. The opposite was true. Doors were closing. Communication lines were being cut off. Law firms that had been working cooperatively with royal channels suddenly received instructions to sever all contact. Not slow down, not pause. Sever. When the analysts at the palace started mapping all this out on a timeline, the conclusion they reached wasn't pretty. This wasn't preparation for negotiation. This wasn't setting the stage for some kind of compromise or discussion. This looked like preparation for a complete break. We're talking about removing children entirely from the structures, educational, legal, symbolic, that connected them to the royal system. And for an institution that literally exists because of continuity, lineage, and careful record-keeping, that realization hit like a freight train. So what did they do? Well, let me tell you about Princess Anne, because this woman doesn't mess around. She didn't wait for committee, meetings, or spend weeks discussing options. She called an emergency meeting, walked in with this thick red folder, and when I say thick, I mean the kind that makes everyone in the room go quiet just looking at it. And she put it right in front of King Charles. No small talk, no easing into the topic, just straight to the point. Her words? Something along the lines of, "This isn't about protecting our reputation anymore. This is about protecting children who are being removed from safety without anyone being able to explain why." Think about what that means for a second. The royal family deals with drama all the time. Scandals, headlines, public relations nightmares, they've weathered it all. But this was different. This touched something fundamental. Because at the end of the day, you can spin stories, you can manage narratives, you can weather public opinion. But when children are involved, when their well-being is genuinely at stake, all that other stuff becomes background noise. Prince William got pulled into the meeting too. They handed him that folder, asked him to read the final page, And the people in that room, people who've worked with William for years, said they saw something shift in his expression. Not anger, not panic, resolve. Pure, unmistakable resolve. His response? He basically said this isn't about personal feelings anymore. The S is about survival. Emotional survival, legal survival, historical survival. That's when everyone knew things were about to get serious. What happened next moved faster than anyone expected. See, the monarchy isn't known for speed. Decisions usually take forever, wrapped up in tradition and protocol and careful deliberation. But this time, they activated protocols that hadn't been touched in generations. We're talking about emergency measures, safeguards that existed more as historical artifacts than actual policy. Passports got frozen, not as some power move, but to prevent any sudden relocations that could complicate an already fragile situation. Commercial use of the children's names shut down immediately. No branding deals, no future contracts, nothing that treated these kids as commodities before they were old enough to understand what that even meant. Then came the really big move. They created a trust, and not just any trust. We're talking massive resources dedicated specifically to education, therapy, long-term care, and what insiders kept calling reintegration. That word matters. It tells you everything about how the palace was thinking about this. They weren't trying to punish anyone or win some kind of power struggle. They were building a safety net, making sure that if these children ever needed support beyond their immediate environment, it would already be there waiting for them. For the first time in modern royal history, the crown began preparing to assume direct guardianship. Let that sink in for a moment. This wasn't about control for control's sake. This was about creating a firewall, a last line of defense against what they saw as a genuine threat. William formally invoked this ancient clause of royal law, something that had been sitting dormant for decades. Nobody needed additional explanation. That clause exists for exactly these moments, when the institution believes that something precious and irreplaceable is genuinely at risk. The vote was unanimous. Not because everyone was happy about it, but because everyone understood what it meant. Once the crown takes that kind of action, there's no walking it back. You can't quietly reverse course or pretend it never happened. This was a line being crossed, and everyone in that room knew it. Now, while all this was unfolding behind palace walls, something else was happening on the other side of the world. And honestly, this part might be even more unsettling than the official moves. Because we're not just talking about legal maneuvers and institutional responses. We're talking about a life slowly, methodically unraveling. Imagine this. You wake up one day and meetings that were scheduled get postponed. Okay, that happens. Then they get pushed back again. Then they're under review. Projects you were excited about, partnerships you'd been building, deals you thought were solid, they all start falling apart, but never loudly. Nobody sends you an angry email or makes a dramatic announcement. They just stop returning your calls. Emails go unanswered. Calendars empty out. It's subtle enough that you can't quite put your finger on what's happening, but obvious enough that you feel it in your bones. That's what people close to the situation say started happening. The children's names, which had been carefully woven into long-term marketing plans and brand strategies, start disappearing. Edited out of drafts, removed from presentations, quietly erased from records as if they'd never existed. No memos explaining why. No official policy change, just silence. And in an industry like Hollywood, an industry built entirely on attention and relevance, silence isn't neutral. Silence is devastating. Silence means you've stopped mattering. The room has moved on without you, and nobody even bothered to tell you. Here's where it gets complicated, though, because while all this is happening, Prince Harry is caught in the middle, and by all accounts, he genuinely believed there was still room for compromise. He spent his whole life inside institutions, right? He knows how they work. He knows that rules can bend, that exceptions get made, that personal history counts for something. So he made requests, asked for time, for flexibility, for temporary custody arrangements while everything got sorted out. The response he got back was clinical, cold, precise, request denied. And the reasons were laid out so carefully, so reasonably, that they were almost impossible to argue with. Unstable residency, unresolved travel limitations, outstanding financial questions. On paper, it all made perfect sense. There was no emotion in it, no personal attack, no vindictiveness, just process, just procedure. And somehow that made it worse, didn't it? Because when someone attacks you emotionally, you can fight back emotionally. But when a system simply explains calmly and methodically why you don't meet the requirements, what do you do with that? The final letter came through official royal channels, formal, sealed, unquestionable. The message was crystal clear. Custody, guardianship, decision-making authority, all of it would now fall under Crown protocol. Any visits would happen under strict supervision. Nothing assumed, everything monitored, everything controlled. The irony is almost painful when you think about it. Here's someone who spent years criticizing royal systems for being cold, rigid, and inhuman, who spoke openly about feeling trapped by protocols and traditions that didn't make room for real human needs and emotions. And now he's caught inside one of those very systems, bound by rules he no longer has any power to challenge. The system didn't change its nature. It just turned to face him. He went from being the outsider speaking truth to power to being a subject of that power, watching helplessly as structures moved slowly but inexorably forward, never reversing, never yielding. There were no dramatic scenes captured by photographers, no explosive confrontations that could be turned into headlines, just a steady, relentless narrowing of options, a feeling of being managed rather than heard, each decision presented as reasonable, each outcome framed as inevitable. And maybe that's the most unsettling aspect of the whole thing. Nothing exploded, nothing collapsed overnight. But somehow, by the time the full weight of it settled in, everything was gone. Every door had closed. Every path had been blocked. And it had all happened so smoothly, so professionally, that you could barely pinpoint the exact moment when negotiation became impossible and the outcome became permanent. Meanwhile, back inside the palace walls, something else was quietly taking shape. Catherine, the Princess of Wales, stepped into a role that nobody really talks about in public, but everyone recognizes is crucial. She wasn't making announcements or giving interviews. She was building structure, creating stability. Her focus went straight to the children themselves, their emotions, their routines, their sense of safety and belonging. Therapy was arranged, but not as punishment or some kind of damage control. It was genuine support. Days were kept predictable because children thrive on predictability. Bedtimes stayed consistent. Familiar faces remained present. Nothing was forced or rushed. George and Charlotte weren't given instructions about how to treat their cousin. They were simply encouraged to see Lily as their sister. No pressure, no scripts, just kindness modeled and allowed to grow naturally. Because here's something most adults forget. Children are incredibly perceptive. They pick up on authenticity. They know when something's real and when it's performance. Then came the photograph. And honestly, this might be one of the most powerful moments in this entire saga. The image just appeared online. No dramatic caption, no lengthy explanation, just two children, one hand holding another. Simple, quiet, real. And it said everything that needed saying about what stability looks like, what protection feels like, what belonging means when it's genuine rather than staged. People stopped when they saw that photo. Some felt comforted by it, others felt unsettled, because it carried a truth that couldn't be argued away with words or spin. Shortly after that, another image appeared, clearly designed to counter the narrative, polished and emotionally charged, meant to reclaim control of the story. The palace didn't engage, didn't argue, didn't fight back with more photos or leaked information. Instead, they responded with 3 short lines that hit harder than any lengthy statement could have. Empowerment is not manipulation. Protection is not obstruction. Silence is not absence. Those words reframed everything. They drew a clear line between genuine care and control disguised as concern, between privacy and secrecy, between real strength and performance. And once those words were out there, they couldn't be taken back. They defined the terms of the entire conversation going forward. After that, things moved to their conclusion quickly, but quietly. Custody arrangements were finalized, not up for discussion anymore. Image rights were locked down with legal weight and royal authority behind them. Most importantly, authority shifted permanently. What many people had seen as a personal family drama, messy, emotional, but ultimately private, revealed itself to be something else entirely. This was about institutional survival, about legacy, about the monarchy correcting course when it believed the balance was threatened. The palace proved something in all of this. Its greatest power has never been noise or spectacle. It's always been control, the ability to move pieces on the board so methodically, so inevitably, that by the time anyone realizes what's happened, the game is already over. Now here's where things get even more interesting, and honestly, kind of unsettling. Because there's this claim that's been floating around for years in royal circles. Never confirmed, never officially denied, just existing in that weird space of whispered conversations and raised eyebrows. The claim? That Prince Andrew knew Meghan Markle long before Harry ever met her. Before you jump to conclusions, let me be clear about what this is and isn't. This isn't some tabloid fantasy about secret romances or dramatic affairs. That's not what anyone's suggesting. This is about something potentially more revealing, about access, about how elite circles work, about the networks that exist behind closed doors where most people never get invited. The people who talk about this claim stress one specific thing repeatedly. Meghan and Andrew moved in overlapping social circles years before her name became connected to the British royal family. These weren't open spaces where anyone with talent or ambition could just walk in. These were carefully managed environments with tightly controlled guest lists. You didn't get access because you were famous. You got access because you were invited, and those invitations were shaped by power, money, and specific kinds of connections, according to insiders, and these are people who operate in these circles professionally. This wasn't random chance encounters. It was a pattern. Private gatherings with small, discreet guest lists. Exclusive dinners hosted by wealthy figures whose names rarely appear in public reporting. Charity events that were less about the cause and more about who you could meet behind closed doors. These were places where titles mattered less than influence, where faces became familiar even if names stayed carefully unspoken. Andrew, long before his very public fall from grace, was known for occupying these spaces comfortably. He had a reputation for moving easily among international financiers, social elites, and power brokers. He wasn't always the most visible royal at public events, but he was often present where influence flowed quietly, where deals got discussed over dinner, where connections got made that would never appear in any official record. Meghan, during her years working in entertainment and humanitarian efforts, had begun appearing in similar circles. She wasn't royalty then. She wasn't even particularly famous in Britain. But she was visible in the kinds of rooms where introductions mattered more than headlines, where being seen by the right people could open doors that talent alone never would. People who noticed this overlap didn't describe it as accidental or coincidental. They talked about it as a system, an unspoken network where certain individuals kept crossing paths because the same hands kept opening the same doors, the same hosts, the same exclusive venues, the same invisible gatekeepers deciding who belonged and who didn't. This is why the claim never completely disappeared, even when it would have been convenient for it to fade away. It doesn't rely on one dramatic moment or one scandalous revelation. It relies on something more mundane but potentially more telling. Repetition. Familiar faces showing up in familiar places. Quiet nods of recognition. A sense that all of this was part of a structure most people never see and wouldn't be invited into even if they knew it existed. For years, the palace did what it does best in these situations. It said nothing. Silence has a way of softening the edges of uncomfortable claims. Without confirmation or denial, stories slip into the background, dismissed by some as mere speculation while others file them away as unresolved curiosities. But circumstance have shifted. Prince Andrew is no longer shielded by the full protection of royal discretion. His role has diminished. His distance from official duties has grown. And with that distance has come a new willingness among observers, commentators, and people inside these circles to revisit old questions that once felt too impolite to ask out loud. The questions themselves are straightforward enough. Did Andrew recognize Meghan before Harry introduced her to the family? Had their paths crossed in ways the public was never meant to know about? And maybe more importantly, what does it say about how tightly connected these elite worlds really are? About how access gets granted and controlled? About the networks that exist beneath the surface of what we see in photographs and official announcements? What makes this claim intriguing isn't what it directly accuses anyone of doing. It's what it reveals about how power actually circulates. Power doesn't move randomly. It creates familiar roots. It brings people together not through fate or chance, but through systems designed to connect certain kinds of individuals while keeping others permanently outside the circle. As Andrew stands further from the royal spotlight now, the claim isn't fading. If anything, it's resurfacing stronger, sharper, harder to dismiss. Not because dramatic new evidence has appeared, but because silence no longer feels like an adequate response. People are asking questions more openly. The protective walls that once made certain topics off-limits are showing cracks. The story remains unresolved, hanging in that uncomfortable space between rumor and reality. But its persistence tells its own kind of truth. Some claims refuse to die not because they're sensational or dramatic, but because they feel plausible in a world built on closed doors, managed access, and networks that operate just beyond public view. They linger because they match what people instinctively understand about how power really works, even if they can't prove it with documents or photographs. So here we are, at the end of this whole complicated saga. From missing school records to frozen passports, from emergency palace meetings to carefully crafted photographs, from legal maneuvers to whispered claims about past connections, it's been quite a journey. The custody situation appears to be settled, at least legally. Authority has shifted, protocols have been established, the institution has corrected course, but questions remain. They always do in situations like this. Questions about what really motivated certain decisions, about what happened behind closed doors during those crucial weeks, about connections that may have existed long before anyone outside elite circles knew to pay attention, about whether this was always heading toward this conclusion or if different choices at different moments could have changed everything. What do you make of all this? Do you think the custody arrangements are fair, or does something about the whole situation sit wrong with you? And what about those persistent claims about past connections in exclusive circles? Do they matter, or are they just distracting speculation? These are genuinely complicated questions without easy answers, and honestly, reasonable people can disagree about what the right outcome should have been. But one thing seems clear. This story revealed something fundamental about how institutions protect themselves, how power operates when it feels threatened, and how quickly situations can shift from negotiable to permanent when certain lines get crossed. It showed us that the monarchy's greatest strength isn't spectacle or drama. It's the ability to move methodically, correct course decisively, and establish new realities so smoothly that by the time everyone realizes what's happened, it's already irreversible. The palace didn't celebrate its victory because that's not how institutional power works. It simply adjusted itself, moved forward, and continued doing what it's done for centuries. Protecting its continuity, safeguarding its future, and ensuring that when the balance tips too far in one direction, it has the mechanisms to pull things back to center. Quietly, firmly, permanently. That's the real story here. Not the headlines or the drama, but the reminder that beneath all the modern updates and social media noise, some things about how power operates haven't changed in hundreds of years, and probably won't change anytime soon. Thanks for sticking with me through this deep dive. If you found this perspective valuable, hit that like button and subscribe for more analysis that goes beyond the surface headlines. Drop your thoughts in the comments below because I'm genuinely curious where you stand on all of this. These conversations matter, and your voice deserves to be heard. Until next time, stay curious and keep questioning what you're told. That's the real story here. Not the headlines or the drama, but the reminder that beneath all the modern updates and social media noise, some things about how power operates have and changed in hundreds of years, and probably won't change anytime soon. Thanks for sticking with me through this deep dive. If you found this perspective valuable, hit that like button and subscribe for more analysis that goes beyond the surface headlines. Drop your thoughts in the comments below because I'm genuinely curious where you stand on all of this. These conversations matter, and your voice deserves to be heard. Until next time, stay curious and keep questioning what you're told. That's the real story here. Not the headlines or the drama, but the reminder that beneath all the modern updates and social media noise, some things about how power operates haven't changed in hundreds of years, and probably won't change anytime soon. Thanks for sticking with me through this deep dive. If you found this perspective valuable, hit that like button and subscribe for more analysis that goes beyond the surface headlines. Drop your thoughts in the comments below because I'm genuinely curious where you stand on all of this. These conversations matter, and your voice deserves to be heard. Until next time, stay curious and keep questioning what you're told. That's the real story here. Not the headlines or the drama, but the reminder that beneath all the modern updates and social media noise, some things about how power operates haven't changed in hundreds of years, and probably won't change anytime soon. Thanks for sticking with me through this deep dive. If you found this perspective valuable, hit that like button and subscribe for more analysis that goes beyond the surface headlines. Drop your thoughts in the comments below because I'm genuinely curious where you stand on all this. These conversations matter, and your voice deserves to be heard. Until next time, stay curious and keep questioning what you're told.